Hello, and welcome to the very first live of the Focused on Infinity podcast with Logan Grendel. I am the aforementioned Logan Grendel, and with me today is someone who I have been following on the internet for some time, and always love the things that he has to share, and just the like mad scientist coolness, basically, for lack of a better word. Trash Robot, please introduce yourselves to our audience here.
Thank you for that introduction. That's very kind of you. I am a huge fan of your content as well. So, introduce myself. I yeah. So, I'm a physicist by trade, and I've done physics for a long time. I've been basically my entire adult life in the military-industrial complex. I would say that I'm 45 years old. And I went to UC Berkeley for undergrad in physics and math, and then went on and worked in labs at Berkeley, and then labs where I ended up going to grad school. And then I worked in kind of the quantum computing, what is now the quantum computing field, and then did more of that in postdoc at a government lab, and then did some startup things. And so, like, I've tried to escape the military industrial complex more than once. With mixed success, and ended up coming back. So I'm back in it now. Mm-hmm. And so my worldview has been shaped by basically being in the military industrial complex for years and years, which is the same as physics. Like, there's physics is the military industrial complex physics. It's all I'm trying to write another book about this actually, but I did some startup things. I did a sex toy startup. I was Dr. Extreme for a period of time. That was the whole thing.
That was so. We'll get to that later. That was really funny.
There was the Dr. Extreme period, and so part of that whole thing though is that I did a company. I was involved with another company too, a quantum computing startup at kind of the same time, which was totally insane, doing those two things at the same time. But that's how I ended up being as anti. So I come from anti-capitalism from the standpoint of having been literally a capitalist. So, people give you money. If you're the CEO, people give you money, and it's your job to allocate capital and turn it into more capital. And so being a CEO gave me a certain perspective in like the deep brokenness, because part of the propaganda of the system is that when things don't work out for you, you just have to go pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do all this stuff or whatever.
Right.
And seeing like how kind of where the magic happens or where the sausages get made of how capital gets turned into more capital or whatever. It's just, I saw this and was like, this is just stupid. Like, when you don't win this game or you do win the game, like the game is so dumb. Like, it's not a game that you should be happy about winning or sad about losing. It's a game that is not like winning isn't like, it's just stupid. Like and I think before I was in that environment of being a CEO, you look at it I looked at it from the outside and was like, well, I think this is stupid, but maybe if I was doing it, wouldn't be stupid. And then I did it and I was like,
nope, still stupid.
Fucking stupid. Everything about this is so stupid, and it's not me, and it's also not that dickhead over there. Like, it's just a stupid game. And so then I wrote this book, The Trash Magic Manifesto, because I started saying, well, what is capitalism? If I hate capitalism, what is it? And then in the end, for me, it boiled down to a few things, to the idea that money as a concept is part of the problem. That actual, like, not just money, like, Federal Reserve debt or gold or whatever. It's the idea that numbers, that value is number. That idea is what I've lost a picture of you. What happened?
Oh, no. It's okay. You're just spotlighted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. Old man media interaction. Sorry, I've been rambling, but like I seem to have gotten wound up. So, money and mining and property, basically, that money, mining, and property. So mining is at the root of the whole structure. And so that's kind of how I end up where I am now. So I wrote this manifesto and I was like, all right, this is all fucked. Like, Capitalism is
Tell us the name of it again.
the book.
Yeah.
The Trash Magic Manifesto. It's
Okay.
it's linked on my website, or at least it should be. I keep changing my website. This is part of my thing, as everything's shifting all the time, but it should be there. Trash Magic Manifesto. There's a free PDF to download, and
Cool.
you can also buy the hard copy at cost. It's like $5 or something. But so I wrote that, and it was all very like blue sky. It was like, this is what we could do. Like, as a physicist, I'm telling you that you could build a whole civilization from just trash. Like, we don't need to be mining anymore because we did it for 300 years. We got really good at it. We have a shit ton of all of the things. We have lots of palladium and tantalum and cobalt and everything else. And we don't need to get any more. Like, if you like cobalt and tantalum, that's fine. We've got plenty of it. We can, but it was all very like blue sky. And so then,
Blue sky meaning like, not practical.
well, and I don't think it's, yeah. I mean, that's, well, just there's a lack of like concrete plan. So it's sort of
Okay.
like, this is a thing that could be done. I don't know how long it's going to take. And here's some like
Correct.
blue, sort of like a hypothetical. You could do this, and I have some ideas as to how you might do it, but I don't really know what I'm talking about. And so then I kind of went off in these different directions, and I bounced around and ended up in. So that's like my background before I started doing this trash robot stuff. And then I got more and more into robotics and trying to understand like how we can have more direct control over the machines that make things. So it's this idea of like the means of replication versus the means of production, that I'm not so much interested in just like, there's a machine that makes stuff that's owned by the capitalist. I want to go own it. But like, I'm not, all of the machines that currently constitute the thing we call the means of production are part of this monster that we're all stuck in, that involves mines and landfills and like ripping everybody off.
So I was just talking about the extractive nature of even like some people's idea of what the future will look like, right? And like how we need to get rid of that in order to divorce ourselves from capitalism, because like if we, just following indigenous leadership, basically, it's like, if we are going to take control of the means of production and then just keep belching smoke into the sky and like pulling rare earth minerals out of the ground, like what have we done, except for just change who's doing the bad thing. Yeah, totally.
Right. So when you say indigenous cultures, that's the key. That's the key to the whole thing, right? Because, and this comes back to what I was saying about means of production versus means of replication. So if you consider something like a boat made out of a tree, so you're an indigenous culture and you have boats and they're made out of living things. A lot of times a boat will be made out of wood. I mean, not just indigenous people. A lot of people make boats out of wood.
Right.
And so you live in the woods. You don't cut down all of the woods. Right. You live in them and you make boats. The boats rot, and that's okay, because you teach your children how to make boats, and the trees keep regrowing, and you continue to replicate the boat, because you are both teaching your children how to make a boat and you are maintaining the vitality of the forest that makes more trees. So you can if you make boats out of wood and you teach children how to make boats out of wood and you don't burn down the forest, you can do that for 10,000 years. Right. Because it's replication. And so that's sort of what I'm talking about with trash, where you take that indigenous prototype of what a mature civilization looks like, but then you take all of the materials we've dug out of the ground for the last 300 years and you apply the indigenous kind of technological prototype to the now available materials that weren't available before we did all this stupid stuff, which is sort of done. And the thing about it too is, you can also, like, one objection you could say, well, we don't need any of that. We'll just go back to an older way or something like that. And the problem with that is that the stuff we've dug out of the ground is so toxic and dangerous that you can't just ignore it. Like, it's not going to go away. You have to have your civilization that you have that we want to actually like continue has to have some way to deal with things like plutonium, which shouldn't exist. We should never have made any plutonium. Oh my God. I could do a whole podcast. I could do a 10-part series about how much I hate plutonium.
Could you give us just like I mean, I'm so curious about all this, and the tech side of things is not my wheelhouse. So, a quick, just a little quick snippet I would love to hear it.
I mean, the quick snippet highlight reel is that I worked for a government lab, and somebody was doing tests with plutonium that involved putting in a glass vial inside a Ziploc bag. And they had secondary containment, but they had a second Ziploc bag. And then they were duct taping it to the bottom of their experiment. And then they were ripping the duct tape off, which pulled a hole in the Ziploc bag. And then they broke the glass. And then the plutonium was powdered and it got out all over the place. And then they walked down the hall to go to the men's room and they washed their hands and they washed plutonium down the drain and then like had radioactive footprints. And then I saw the
like
management boss. Yeah. No, they had people with Geiger counters on the floor tracking. They could see like where his footprints went over to the toilet, to the urinal or whatever.
Damn.
And it was nobody got poisoned. Nobody got thyroid cancer that we know of that was related to that. But the thing about it was that once I had this experience, and it was this whole big clusterfuck, even though no one actually got really badly exposed, the behavior of our management was exactly the same as the behavior of the management at Fukushima and Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island and like every other one of these things, because that's how bureaucracies behave. Bureaucracies behave with these patterns. And every time the nuclear bros will say, no, dude, it's going to be different next time, blah, 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 blah. But like they have all these fantasies where once they do all this shit that they're not going to get working, then it's going to be safe, because it's only not safe because of human error. But you get that it's humans that run the thing, right?
Right,
so it's this bizarre thing where they're like, well, it's just human error. But like, right, but that's how technology works. Like you can't just do the thing where if you like show up, if you do something a little dumb, you're going to get your arm cut off for no fucking reason. And then they're like, well, you should have done something dumb. But like, no, actually having a giant like metal fan blade with no guard with small children around it is like, that's actually on the person who designed the fan blade.
I hear you. So like going back to the idea of like replication versus production to begin with, we're talking about changing, and I talk about decolonizing a lot, and this seems like you're talking about decolonizing at the base level, like at like the tech level. And tech is basically, I mean, tech is what runs societies, right? Whether we're talking about, plutonium or we're talking about wood, trees, whatever, we're talking about tech and the things that, how to make and acquire the things that we need to create human societies, right? Cool. Well, I want to, now we've got I've got a little bit of an idea of like your background and just that. Like I want, there was one of your TikToks that I saw where you talk about building like this like little doohickey. It was like a suitcase and like a solar panel, and you can, tell us basically about how we could, let's start with just the internet. How could we have an internet without AT&T and without, without all of these systems that are linked inextricably and intentionally rather than just ideologically to the systems that we don't want anymore?
Well, you have to replace each layer of the system. So you have to look at what the layers are and what they do. So what are the layers? You've got basically the client side, which is the part that is actually the bit with the screen that you carry around with you. And then there's the servers. And then there's all the bits that connect them. Like in the crudest way, I'm just going to break it into those three parts. There's the part that you look at with the screen. There's the part that delivers the files, and the part that gets from point A to point B. And I think that we can replace all three of those with things that are free and that are in the public domain and that we build. And I think people are already doing that. So like in New York City, so you're in New York City, right?
Yeah.
And there's this thing that people keep sending me the link, and I keep not being able to figure out like kind of how much they have their shit together or not. But as far as I can tell, they have their shit together more than anybody else who's doing this in the United States, at least. And
I'll be the first to admit I have not had the time to investigate it yet, but please tell everyone what you're talking about. The mesh, right?
Yeah, it's I think it's nycmesh.net. is the web address, and then it's a mesh network. And so a mesh network is a class of networks, and I know very little about it. I'm not an expert on this stuff by any stretch, but it's essentially a network that the different nodes in the network can in principle all send information to one another. So you have all these nodes, and then let's say you have a city like New York where there's lots of buildings and people put antennas on the roofs of lots of buildings, and many buildings are able to see many other buildings. And so a mesh network is a network where, should any one of those buildings be taken offline, the network can kind of reroute traffic around it. So it's this like decentralized traffic routing system. At least that's how I understand it. There may be network engineers hearing this who are turning purple with how I'm saying it wrong or something. but as I understand it, it's sort of a self-healing network in the sense that's very important, where if some bad thing happens to one node, then the thing sort of, which is how the internet at large works, at least in theory. The idea of the internet, part of what the pitch was in the military industrial complex in the early days, was you were going to build a network where after the Soviets take out half the country, the network can heal. Like that was part of the idea, was to have this, the same thing that makes the internet in theory resistant to like destruction, where any one part of it goes down. That was pitched initially as a defense against the hydrogen bomb. But it works, and so mesh networking and so this is the other thing about mesh networking is you use wireless. You use point-to-point wireless, meaning you take a point and you take a directed antenna, and you take another point and you direct these antennas at each other. And so the thing about that is, when you're in a city and you're just broadcasting randomly to the whole city, you all have to compete for frequency space. But if you have something that's a tight enough beam from one point to another, you can have a very large number of these points in a city with buildings that are all pointing at each other, or even just towers if you're out in the desert somewhere.
Right.
And you can start getting a lot more bandwidth in. And so that's a thing where it becomes, this is a process that people are doing all over the world. There's a great book, actually, a book I highly recommend. This book, Wireless Networking in the Developing World.
Okay.
And the PDF is free online. I think it's wndw.net or something like that, but you can look that up. Wireless Networking in the Developing World. And that's free. And I really, like, a big part of what I really want to do is just convince more people to read that and figure out how to do it, and then just do it. Because it's one of these direct action things.
Right.
You don't have to form a nonprofit. You don't have to raise $1 million. You don't have to do anything with the government. You don't have to get permission. These are unregulated frequencies. You just buy a bunch of cheap stuff and start putting it up, and nobody's going to stop you. And that's what they're doing in New York. Like they're not a telco. Like, that's I think awesome. They have a nonprofit status or something like that, but they're not like a fancy. They're not participating in FCC bureaucracy, as far as I know. You just do it. It's legal.
So is this, I mean, do you think, realistically, like, I don't know anything about the science behind it, but like, do you think it's realistic that it could be something that could be done? And like, going back to like the ones that you make, right? Like, is that something that you could teach a person, just like a random person, how to do that doesn't have that much tech experience? Like,
Right. So for the installs, again, I'm reading their website, and I can't verify this. You have to ask around. But supposedly the NYC Mesh people, that is part of what they do, is they train new people. Like they're try to be a self-replicating system where they will, like, it's all volunteer-led, and the way volunteers exist is that existing volunteers are trained them, and they're trying to be friendly to people who are not sort of tech savvy, where they just sort of give you kits and teach you how to do it.
Yeah.
That's not the part that I've put the most work into. So that part, partly because it is sort of already done, what I've been working on is this Raspberry Pi stuff. So the Raspberry Pi, if I just grab one of these.
It sounds delicious.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, no, I love it. Right. And like, once they made the decision to use that Raspberry, like Pi, the Pi pun or whatever, there's a million of them, like blueberry.
So tell, pretend I have no idea what a Raspberry Pi is, because I don't. What is it like? What is it? What does it do? What is it?
It's a computer that's about the size of a deck of cards, and the whole thing actually just lives on this little chip.
Huh.
That's where like all the memory is and
It's like
everything
an
when you
SD
install
card.
it. It's an SD card. Yep.
Okay.
And so this board costs between $50 and $75, and then the chip is like another $10, and then
Hmm.
what I do, and then there's all these accessories you can get to try to turn it into like a real computer. So this is a screen, and then you can just get like regular USB. It has USB ports, so you like a
Huh.
mouse and keyboard. And then I take those and I carry them around in a cloth sack. So I have my cloth sack with the Raspberry Pi logo that I stitched on here. And I can
Nice.
just carry this around over my shoulder, like a shoulder bag.
Yeah.
And this is the web server that hosts all the files. And then the files are these self-replicating sets of documents. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to do right now, is have this thing where you replace the internet of users with an internet of documents. So right now you log in, everybody's logged into stuff all the time, and then they have their feed, and this is the stuff that I made, and that's the stuff that you made, and I'm sharing your thing, and you're sharing. No users, no logins, no passwords, no private data, no databases of any kind, just documents. It's
just
a
stuff.
library of documents, and the documents can tell stories. The documents can tell you how to do things. And that is why this is so important to this idea of machine replication, is that it's the idea is to build a library where the library is made of books that are made of these shorter articles that are text documents that tell you how to replicate all the things you need to replicate. So when you go up to the public space and there's some public Wi-Fi. So what we want to do with this library is that each location will have free public Wi-Fi with like no password, no login, no encryption, whatever. You just go on the free public Wi-Fi, and then there are web servers that have free available information, but all that information replicates from one server to the next. So you can see it over the local Wi-Fi without the real internet, but it also is being replicated to public web pages. And there's a variety of ways to do that. It sort of gets into some technical stuff, but
so you can use it just with like, okay, so how would one of these Raspberry Pis connect to, like, would it connect to another Raspberry Pi? You'd have your own, and then like they could connect to each other somehow without the use of the internet, or you would need a Wi-Fi intermediary. Either.
Well, you need some kind of connection. So you can connect them with a wire, you can connect them wirelessly, or you can connect them through the open internet. And you can also connect, but like, because each thing can copy to each other thing, like the way I do it when I'm at home is I have like two Raspberry Pis. I have like the Raspberry Pi at the foot of the bed, the Raspberry Pi behind the TV, and then I sit on my laptop and I use the laptop to edit code on the local laptop hard drive, which I push to GitHub, which is a publicly, so that's like a page that hosts code. And then from GitHub, I copy to all the Raspberry Pis. And so in principle, that, because that's hosted, like I'm using a mix of my own resources that are free, and then like resources that are free, like you don't have to pay for them, but they're part of the commercial internet. So like GitHub is a big company that I think maybe is even owned by Microsoft or something. But they let you do free shit on there as long as your stuff is open source. And so because everything we do is open source, you don't have to pay or there's no paywall, there's no access limitations. So I push everything to GitHub, and then from GitHub, it replicates out to all my Raspberry Pis, but it also replicates to public-facing web pages like trashrobot.org or, any of my other personal. I have like a lot of domains, and all of those. So like
right now, you're kind of pirating. It's like a pirate radio station basically that is broadcasting to like the airwaves basically. I mean, metaphorically speaking, you know what I mean?
Yeah, or like
sort of literally.
BitTorrent. It's kind of like BitTorrent. Like in BitTorrent, everybody's downloading from everybody else all the time.
Right. Okay.
It's like I've built a BitTorrent network where everybody's pirating music, but I'm the only musician and also the only listener, and I've just got like a whole playlist that I wrote myself, and then I'm furiously copying it back and forth to all of my servers. So it's like I go on the real social media and there's all these people, and then I go on my social media and there's like all these documents and I'm all alone. There's like 10 servers and dozens of documents, and I'm sitting here alone, and I'm like, oh, this is so peaceful. I'm all alone on my social network. But
so the idea is that like so other people could build these Raspberry Pis, and you just would link, and you could link to each other.
Yep.
And how many would you need in order to make it so that like you could go a decent distance? You know what I mean? How far can they travel? Like how many, what sort of buy-in would you, because what I'm seeing, like the primary, the first use I'm just imagining is like, say you're on, some commune or something,
Mhm.
whatever, right? Where you just have like 40 acres and everybody who is on this commune has one of these and you just link it all together. So you have like, your own sort of standalone internet, but it's just like a local internet.
Well, you only need one. So if everybody else
Oh.
has a mobile phone, then all of those mobile phones can be just reading, like it's serving the
Oh,
documents,
I see what you're saying.
but you
Okay.
still have your mobile phone. So this is the thing
Right.
is that when these documents, so like I can, if you're on a place with a couple of dozen people, that one Raspberry Pi can be everybody. And then if it's not a couple dozen because there's like 10,000 people there for a festival or something,
Right.
then that Raspberry Pi can just be replicating to publicly hosted web pages. Like you can just be constantly
Hmm.
moving the information to something that has enough sort of like backbone to support it. And then all
Hmm.
10,000 of those people use the phone they already have to see it.
Hmm.
And so that's how that scales.
Okay. Now, what happens though if, say, say, I don't know, like the main internet goes out,
Mhm.
right? How would these be able to work with each other without using public Wi-Fi or anything like that?
Well, you would use your own Wi-Fi. So this is the idea: is that you try to have it where you're out on your 40 acres, and or in the middle of a city, but the city network goes down,
Right.
and you have your hotspots that you put in, and those hotspots get everybody onto the local network, even though the internet is down. All of those individual phones, when you go onto you can get like sometimes your internet will, at least where I live, the internet will get broken for a minute, but like you can still get on the Wi-Fi, but then it says no internet. It'll be like you're
Yeah.
connected, but there's no internet. And so, in principle, should the internet either go down or we have enough of these that we don't care as much anymore, uh, you could slowly take over the role of the internet where everything is these documents. And that's really where I
Hmm.
want to get, because I do want to deploy this in rural areas. And
Yeah.
part of why it's so powerful to do in rural areas is that when people already have a lack of access to bandwidth, it
Yeah.
gives you an excuse for the whole thing. So part of how do we support this? Like how do
Hmm.
we pay for my time to go do this or something? You have to get grants. And so
Right.
one way to get grants, I mean, there's a number of things you could do, but one thing you could do is get grants, and the grants can pay for broadband. Extending broadband access into rural America is something that is like constantly politicians will say we want to do that, and then they'll
Yeah.
like put some money into something, and then like nobody has their shit together, but like the money's kind of there. Like politicians are, there are a variety of different politicians who have schemes to try to do this, and then
Yeah.
the private sector doesn't want to do it because it doesn't make a lot of money, but then nobody
Hmm.
else ends up having their shit together. It's one of these like mutual aid type of deals where like the private
Right.
sector won't do it and nonprofits don't have their shit together. And so like random people just need to, like, the number of
Just gotta
people who need
make
to
it
get their
happen.
shit together can be like a dozen people. You can be like in a
Huh.
village of 1,000 people, you get like a dozen people or less, but I mean a dozen people make it really easy.
Yeah.
So what I'm hoping to do is try to
Hmm.
connect with people in rural communities in Alaska, because I know people up there, and try to like get money to go bring it into the native villages. And then that
Hmm.
starts to get back to that kind of like trying to connect with indigenous technology, because part of what you want to do is build the document server, teach everybody how to use it, make sure it's super easy to use, very accessible, very open, and then start taking all that knowledge that people have and getting it onto the network in a self-replicating fashion. And
Hmm.
so then, whatever information people have about the ecosystems and about how stuff really works out in the woods and like what makes
Right.
the ecosystem tick, you start to bring that onto the network. And then, you combine that with that you're trying to get these out there in rural areas where you try to also get sensors put in so that you're monitoring water quality, you're monitoring air quality, you're
Hmm.
monitoring soil quality. And that's integrated into your human knowledge system. So it's
Huh.
in the very long run, the goal is to build a network that gets rid of the entire internet structure. So you have wireless point
Right.
to point communication, and you replace the giant data centers with lots and lots and lots of these little servers. And eventually you want to replace, because right now these things are still a complete disaster. These are like mine to landfill, 18 months, mine to landfill.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so
Planned obsolescence. Gotta love it.
it's planned obsolescence. Right. So part of what's in, this is my other book, the book of Geometron. It talks about like this plan of what that whole media stack would look like, where you ultimately, right now, it's Raspberry Pis, whatever phone you already have, and wireless network stuff that you just buy from Newegg or something like that. But that's not sustainable, right? We are trying to replace everything with trash. So the goal is you build that where it's free, in the sense that like you can find ways to build it all with donated money. There's no property, there's no logins, it's free in that sense, but it's still tied into the mine system. But once you start to replace those elements with things that are all upcycled, then you start to take these screens out, you start to stitch them together and make media where, like, my goal is to eliminate personal media, to have all media be public. So you go into a public space and there's like hundreds of screens, and they're all integrated into these like art pieces that are like part biological things and part screens. And they're all
sounds
serving
wild,
the
but really
documents
cool.
that everybody's. So you have this like hyper library where everywhere you go, there are screens that are available, which are being powered by local energy, by the tides and the wind and sun, whatever, things like that, that are powering these screens, and all the documents can replicate. So if I'm somewhere that's different from where I was, and I go, oh, geez, I'm over here instead of over there, but these people, all they care about is chemistry, and I want to do physics. Where's my physics books? So then I just go replicate my physics books, because they've already been replicated from my Raspberry Pi over in, whatever, Alaska, off to the GitHub thing that then, I mean, this assumes the internet's still there. So it's like this, but like eventually, as you keep scaling it up, you keep replacing. You replace GitHub with your own resources, and then you replace DreamHost with your own, we want to be replacing every single thing that's part of a company or anything that's property at all. Because my goal is the total abolition of property, money, and mining, like completely. To me, that's capitalism. Capitalism is money, mining, and property. And I want to knock out all three legs and replace them with non-property trash technology that's just like in a cycle.
So like get rid of the E. I'm gonna say, instead of mining, I'm gonna say extraction, and then money and property. So like, let's call it EMP. We're gonna get rid of the EMP. EMP. Extraction, mining, and property. Okay. So okay. Wow. It's a lot. This is like right at the edge of my ability to take all in, but I'm loving it. So how much of this could we make from trash? You know what I mean? Like, how much of this could, and how long would it take? Like, say we just got everybody to know how to do this tomorrow, right? How long would it take to implement something like this? And the cool thing that I'm hearing in this is that everything we're talking about, one of the things I talk about is dual power, right? We got to build power now that is not connected to the existing power structure, because like the idea of taking it over means that we're just going to be doing the same thing. We have to build stuff that doesn't need the stuff, and then have people be like, oh, wait, there's already something. Right. Mm-hmm. So like when you tell people, okay, don't buy from Amazon, right? Or don't buy, let's make it even simpler, right? Don't buy from, don't buy from Whole Foods, right? We have a series of local community gardens, just buy from them. So the dual power is right there. So this sounds like kind of what you're saying, but in a sort of tech sense, and like both in a literal sense and in like the technological sense. So yeah, how long would it take to implement, and how much of it could be built from trash, from upcycled things?
Well, in the long run, to go to the trash thing first, in the long run, absolutely freaking everything, because you've already done it once. Like you have the proof of principle that you've done it. Like it's sitting right here, right? So this thing is going to die. but like
Right.
it doesn't go away, right? Like every single thing, you got all these people who are like, we need more lithium. We gotta have a coolant lithium, so we gotta have more lithium. But like the lithium's literally sitting right there. Like that, the lithium doesn't go away. It doesn't evaporate like lithium. The
Right.
cobalt and
Right.
everything,
Right.
it doesn't go away. I get into these arguments with people and they're like,
Right.
well, what about this and what about that? But like, where do you think it goes? Like,
Right.
it
Just sitting in
doesn't go away.
landfills, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are
Yeah.
some non-renewable resources, like helium actually does go away, but helium is very unusual. All those metal minerals, they don't go anywhere. And so, like, it might be hard to figure out how to use them, but this is the thing. It's not as hard as the thing we already did. Because what we did when we figured out how to use aluminum and molybdenum and tantalum and cobalt and stuff is you took tons and tons and tons of ore. I've spent a lot of time watching mining videos on YouTube. I've gone way down mining YouTube, like mining history, these historical things. And you can see what goes into these things, like what it took to figure out how to turn bauxite into aluminum. It is a pain in the ass. Like it takes or silicon, the history of the same thing with these semiconductor chips where like, it's going to be a little tricky to figure out how to take a broken, old, obsolete Pentium and turn it into usable tech. But compared to making the first Pentium, this is falling off a log. We already did the hard thing. The hard thing was figuring out how to go from dirty sand to this like
a computer chip,
thing with billions of transistors on it. We did the hard part. Figuring out how to take that thing with a billion transistors that runs at 1 billion clock cycles per second and turn it into something that's pretty useful, useful enough to kind of contribute something to this big blob of weird trash media they're making. That's not easy. Like we're so conditioned by the system to think that everything is either just done for you or you have to like do it yourself in your backyard with like a multi-tool or something. And like people have forgotten that there are things that are pretty hard that are not like going to the moon, and they're also not a thing you can do in your backyard. They're just kind of hard. And we have a lot of problems now that I think are in that category. And I think the hard part for us right now is just getting organized, because the technology is not, I think, super hard. And this is part of why I think physics is so fucked right now, is that everybody's always trying to do a hard thing, but if you do something that's kind of hard, you can't get it funded because it's not new. Like it isn't new to go and just like take a bunch of stuff and like a bunch of trash and just like save a lot of money by upcycling. Like that's not, you can do that as a business, you can do it as a nonprofit, but no one will fund you to do that as a researcher because it's not new.
Right.
And so we have
and not terribly profitable, right?
Well, I mean, it could be in some cases, but yeah, I mean, in general, the way that like so much of what people talk about with recycling is just bullshit. It's just like, I found out, this is so horrifying. I think you'll appreciate this, but I was looking into government recycling things, and like particularly with the military, because the military has so much waste. And so I'm attached to the military industrial complex. I know some things about getting money from these ding dongs. So I was looking into like, how do you get money from the military to like do recycling? And I find this program. I'm like, oh, this looks like a great program. Military waste. We're doing something. But it turns out that thing where they give fucking rocket launchers to cops, they're marketing that as like
recycling.
Yeah, they're like, we're doing something about waste. Instead of sending it to the landfill, we're giving it all to the cops, and then they pat themselves on the back for how much waste they're eliminating. Like that's actually
it's such
like
a scam.
Yeah. They marketed it to Congress. They all this testimony in front of Congress. They're like, we're trying to do something about government waste. We're just going to give rocket launchers to cops, and then they don't go to the landfill. I'm like,
wow.
Yeah.
That's
Bummer.
I'd rather they went in a landfill, honestly. Much better than giving it to those goony birds.
I'm pretty sure if we took them apart, you could find something to do with them in your garden, if you thought about it. We can do some stuff with it, but that's what I'm saying. There's like this middle ground where like we're so used to everything the system does being so fucked that we think we have to do everything in our backyard because that's what you do if you're all alone. But
Yeah.
when we start, like, this is part of my thing about right now is that, like, the PowerPoint classes are fed up. Like, it's about 50-50 when I deal with these military industrial complex people. Some of them are still, like, half of them are maybe still like quasi Kool-Aid drinkers, and they're all still stuck in it. They don't know how to get out. But
Right.
like a lot of them are like, this is crazy. Oh my God, people are having nervous break. People come into work, they're having
Yeah.
panic attacks on the way into work. They're like curled up in a ball crying
Oh
at their
no.
desk and stuff. The people are just coming apart because they can't believe how fucking stupid everything is. And
Right.
all they want to do is like nice stuff. People want to do stuff that's like, scientists want to do things that's useful to somebody and that's true, as in like not false. And
Yeah.
it turns out that's like really hard now. And there's a lot of people saying, "Oh, look at this press release," but like I can go down the line with these press releases why they're bullshit.
Hmm.
And so the non Kool-Aid drinkers. So this is my point about the PowerPoint classes, though, is that a lot of these science types who, if you're like a white male Ivy League type of a jackass in the 1960s, you go to Bell Labs and you're like, this is all right. You know what? There's some problems with our society, but this is pretty all right. But like that person, which is kind of me, I'm kind of like a middle-aged jackass white guy with an Ivy League PhD. And, it sucks. It's all broken. And there's all these, because like our work is bad. Our work is just objectively bad, both in the sense that the quality is very poor and we're not doing anything new, and also in the sense that it's all just like fucked up shit.
Yeah. It's like it's not good and it's not true, really.
Right. And so you have to see that as an opportunity where it's like you've got these people who are trying to make their own insulin out in the Bay Area. They've got all these very earnest but clearly incompetent nerds who are trying to figure out how to make their own insulin. But like what they have to realize is everybody who works for the big pharmaceuticals hates their fucking job. Like they just hate their job. And so
this is a really good point.
Provide the ability for them to switch sides. We don't have to figure out how to make insulin. You get all these people who've been in the pharmaceutical business for 25 years and hate their fucking job. The instant we have a lab for them to work in, they'll just come over and make the insulin for us, and they'll do it safely because all the people at the FDA who hate their jobs are going to come over and make sure your shit's safe. So like we have to realize that when we start to build that power from the ground up, as soon as you start to get the point where you can actually support people, they'll jump ship, and then you don't have to figure any of this stuff out. All you have to do is figure out how to feed the person who knows how to do medical safety, and feed the person who knows how to like make ibuprofen, and feed the people who know how to make estrogen.
See, this
as
is
long
amazing.
as you can feed those people, they'll switch sides because they hate their fucking jobs.
This is exactly like, this is why, this is the biggest reason I wanted to talk to you, is because like that is right. And this helps me to fix something in my own brain, which is like, it is easy for me as a person who is not connected to any of these systems to just sort of toss all the people who are in those systems into a bucket in my head. And I acknowledge that that is like, that's on me, right? Because like, well, I'm not a scientist, so I just assume everybody who's working at these places, like they're down. But like, no, everybody's born in this system, right? Everybody has the same indoctrination, and everybody just tries to get through the best way they know how. And if you have a brilliant science mind, what are you going to do but work for some lab in the military industrial complex? And like you said, creating new systems that these people can jump ship to, that's the other good thing about dual power that I haven't even really been thinking about, which is the more that you have built, actually I kind of did allude to it, but like I didn't put two and two together completely, but like the more that we build, the more that we can just drag people over because they don't have any allegiance to it. It's just what they're doing because they have to live, and that's how you have to live in this society. That's really,
and
that's a really great thought.
Like it's getting worse, right? So some of these people are fucking ready to go. Like there's this one guy I talked to, and it's so heartbreaking. He's a lot of very, very, there's so many different ways in which he's like a character. He's a problematic, like 50 something white dude at a government lab. And he's got things to say about what the government did to his ravioli or some damn thing. But like, all he wants to do is biomedical physics. He just wants to make like nice things for medical imaging. And he has a lot of thoughts about it. He's like a really smart, very mathematical person. He wants to like think about how to use math to do biomedical imaging, and he wants to take care of his plants. He loves his plants. He just like, he likes the garden. And he's like deep in the military industrial complex. And he's like got a very high, he's got the highest level, whatever, the above top secret, blah, 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 blah. And so he goes over and he works for, I mean, I probably shouldn't say too much, but like he works for some people at a place where he can go, and he talks about this rapturously about how he's like, when I work with these people, I have this level of clearance where I can go in a room and shut the door, and there's a man with a gun outside. And if management ever tries to bug me, the man with the gun will stop management from talking to me because it's against the law for them. And like he hates it. He knows it's all bullshit. He's part of this. I won't even say what field they're working on, but like the whole field is bullshit. And he's like a very vocal, this is all bullshit. And like even at work, I mean, I think the sponsor actually values a little bit the fact that he's like a guy who calls bullshit on stuff because they want to like check up on these professors or whatever. Yeah. But the whole story is just so heartbreaking. Like he doesn't want much. This is not a guy who wants a sports car. He doesn't. Right. I'm sure he has a very, very high salary that he's saved for many decades. And he just like doesn't want anything but for, I think he wants to, he hates, if you think you hate Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos, like this guy hates Bill Gates. A lot of people don't hate Bill Gates as much as they used to, but I
just listened to the episode of Behind the Bastards on Bill Gates, and I'm there.
I have to listen to that. I have not listened to that.
Always recommend that podcast. It's really good. Yeah. They're currently doing one on Jeff Bezos. The Bill Gates one.
Bezos. So, right. No, a lot of these people are ready to go. One other thing I want to say about dual power, though, I just wanted to throw it out there because it's like a thing that I'm trying to get out is the idea of the bottom-up Green New Deal. The idea that, how they're always blathering about the Green New Deal. And I've always thought the Green New Deal was bullshit because every single thing that comes out of a Democrat's mouth ever is bullshit, just because like they're never going to get anything done. Yeah. And then like to the extent that they want to, they can't. To the extent that they can't, they don't want to. It doesn't matter. Like at the end of the day, it's like these people in the beginning of the pandemic who are like, well, if they get a vaccine out in the next 6 weeks and nobody leaves the house for 10 weeks, and it's like, well, right, but like, there's not going to be like, what are you talking about? Like nothing you're saying makes any sense. And that's the thing about the Green New Deal is people want to have these discussions about, well, if you do this and if you do that, but like none of it, like this is America. None of those things are going to happen. Right. But like, if you imagine, so let's say you want to put some number of terawatts of green power out in the world. Well, if you take 1 billion people and you multiply it, let me see if I'm getting this math right. So a terawatt is 1 trillion watts. So 1 billion people times 1,000 watts is a terawatt. I think I have that right. So the idea
you could say anything. I have no idea.
So okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm getting it.
It's okay. It's fine.
I'm really excited about
it. No, it's cool. I love it.
So 1,000 watts is about so a human being just sitting here is like 100 watts, like just sitting doing nothing. A human body is about 100 watts. And 1,000 watts is the maximum power you can possibly get from the sun over 1 square meter, roughly give or take, of like hot sun, direct hot sun. It's about 1,000 watts. So what we use now is about 10,000 watts per person in America, like all the time.
Wow.
And a huge amount of that is just stupid shit, right? We drive around in circles. We have military jets furiously flying around in circles. We have helicopters flying around in circles, shooting guns all the time. And
just to justify their budgets, basically. Like construction workers standing around not doing anything because they have to justify their budget.
Right. To build roads so people can drive around in circles all day. And So I don't think we should be doing 10,000 watts. So one of the things you'll hear people talk about is how many watts per person should we spend? So America is crazy, but then there are people who don't have access to refrigeration, and that's like a basic human rights issue, right? So like somewhere between not refrigeration and drive around in circles all day and shoot guns, like somewhere between those is like the right amount. And so if you want to get lots of power, like I tend to think of these things of like, how do you divide things and scale it down? So take a gigawatt project and say, can you replace that with 100 kilowatt project with like a few dozen people or a few hundred people that you're servicing? Like, how much can you scale it down? And or taken the other way, this is why I say bottom up Green New Deal is you start out with just like literally these solar panels I carry over my shoulder that are like 30 watts that are just enough to power my devices and nothing else. You start with that and you make that free. You figure out a business model where you can bring those out to the street, where like part of what I want to do is be have solar power be like a mutual aid thing where you can make these charging stations where you carry it over your shoulder and you can charge devices. And one of the things people struggle with who are surviving on the streets is just having access to a place to charge their devices. And so if you have
how much do you think it would cost to like make something like you know one of those like, you know, mobile charging stations? How much would it cost to make one? Like
$100.
Really?
Yeah. So yeah, I have here. So I have the solar panel. Like I've got a couple of solar panels here. I also make some embellishments to the solar panels. I put googly eyes on them and rainbow duct tape. That's awesome. Just like have them fit in with the theme. But yeah, this thing, I carry this around over my shoulder. And then there's a battery. I use these lead acid batteries. So the battery also has googly eyes, but I carry this around over my shoulder. And that's a beefy battery. That's a battery that I can run like my web server on for quite a few hours. And then the battery charges from the solar panel. And so the whole kit, including the web server, the solar panel, the battery, is about $400 for like the entire system.
That's cool as hell.
And so, and that's the kind of thing where like, if it's $400 to have an entire technology system that you can release free of the property system, it does not owned by anybody, out onto the street, you teach people on the street how to use it, and you call it part of the library system, because part of what the library does is provide internet access to the most vulnerable. Like if you go into an urban library, you know, they'll have that huge computer array, and like every single computer station is filled with somebody who's just like using that to survive, basically.
Yeah, totally.
And so the library is already serving that function, but they kick everybody out when the library closes. And this would be, you know, of course, libraries cost a lot of money to keep open. I mean, they have a budget, but this would be something that you would have that's like the next level. It's again decentralization. So like as sort of free and decentralized as libraries are, this is like taking it down to the unit of something you can carry over your shoulder, take out into a park, teach people how to use, and say, this is public property. Like this isn't mine. It's not yours. Awesome. It's just like we're releasing it into the world. Right. And then if that starts to have value and people start to use it, and people start to use it as a platform. So you write a book and you release it onto here. You say the Grey Jedi Grimoire and you release it.
Love it.
Which I'm pretty sure the world needs, right? And then I've got my books that I'm working on, and other people, you know, we try to, there's somebody on TikTok who's like a mycology person who's just working on like a book. Like trying to do DIY, just like getting the clean enough space. I have no experience with mushrooms, but like getting that space that's clean enough that you don't get contamination of your spores.
I don't have any experience with that kind of mushroom, that's for sure.
Well, there's so many different awesome kinds of mushrooms. And that's the thing, is that there's like plastic eating mushrooms, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff.
I've recently read about this. So okay, this conversation is like making me so happy, because there's like three main things that I've already taken away from this. One is that, you know, a lot of this we could just start doing like right now. Two, it interlinks a lot of different things. And three, starting with like, you know, the most vulnerable people, we could build like the infrastructure that would be required to replace the existing infrastructure. And like, so if it only costs $400 to like have one of these things, that's not a lot of money, you know. I mean, like, you know, you know what I mean? It's like not really that much money. So I guess this is something that actually maybe we'll talk further offline, but a plan for doing this. I want that immediately, and then we can just push it out and have people just start doing it. Like, and
Yeah.
that's the best thing about it is that like, the idea of replication versus extraction,
Right.
replication versus production. Like, no one needs to be in charge of it, and like
Yeah.
once the genie's out of the bottle,
Yeah. Yeah.
it just goes, and we could just start. Wow, that's
Yeah.
awesome, and it also gives me more hope because, like you said, getting people who with the know-how, whose lives have been co-opted essentially by capitalism, to just give them another option, give them an out.
Yeah.
That's like that's right there is going to be huge in getting us to a better world, basically. And also, if we can get them out, that means that we have taken someone out of the existing power structure. So it's like it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm very believe very deeply from interacting with all these people inside the system is that no one needs to tear down this system. The system, the instant, like the system is this constantly
Right.
inflating balloon, right? And the
Yeah.
instant people have something else they can do, it's going to collapse. Like you don't need to go
Right.
jackhammer the roads. Like you wait 20
Right.
years and all the roads are gone. Like
Yeah.
everything is
Yeah.
falling apart all the time and they're constantly propping it up. It's like empire, right? Like it takes so much energy,
Right.
literally,
Yeah.
literally energy and also figuratively energy to maintain an empire. You
Hmm.
don't need to blow up an empire. Like all you have to do is stop pumping energy out into the empire and it'll just collapse on its own.
That's that
Because
that's totally. I would think about that in terms of ideologically, like white supremacy and like patriarchy. Like that's the reason that there's so much propaganda all the time,
yeah,
because if you let people just meet each other and hang
right.
out, you
Yeah,
wouldn't have these ideas that would replicate themselves. Like they wouldn't replicate because they're not. What I forget exactly what you said, but like they're not true and they're not useful. So
yeah,
they would
yeah,
just die on their own
yeah,
if they
yeah,
weren't
yeah.
constantly being
Right,
kicked out in ads and in movies and in
right.
everything around us. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's right. The system. Right, and yeah, yeah. So getting these people, I think, is absolutely critical. Like the drug problem is really huge. Like one of the things we have to figure out as I use that expression completely in a way that makes no sense to 90% of people. What I mean by the drug problem is figuring out how to make drugs as the existing supply chains collapse, like making safe
Mm,
medication, all of the medication free and safe. So like the free insulin project and
yeah,
getting free hormones and all these kinds of things. Like the
that's an
faster you
amazing
can
idea.
build like free insulin, free hormone, like just those two. If you can get free insulin and free hormones, and like really free, not free like I made a YouTube video, but like actually where people are using it,
Yeah,
because there's a whole lot of that. But that just changes everything, and you only need to get a few of these. Like I actually went back when I had the dildo company, we had somebody who was it was like
we got to talk about that before we go. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Just go ahead,
okay.
but keep going. Yeah.
So yeah, the person who took over for me as CEO, and I decided I didn't want to be CEO anymore. She had done like everything for our company. She did. She was our chief operations officer, and she'd done a bunch of fulfillment and customer service and like copywriting and worked on the website or whatever. And she was a refugee from pharma. Like she had just
Huh.
had this soul crushingly. She was a very good scientist, and she'd done bounced around and done all these shitty jobs that basically all involved doing this with the pipette over and over and over again, and
Right.
having other people take all the credit because like the PhDs like get all the credit, but then the lower level people do all the work.
Right.
And it was soul crushing and it was terrible pay. And
Yeah.
so, we're like, whatever, you work whatever hours you want. Everybody gets paid the same $36 an hour.
Hmm.
And we mess around with crazy dildo technology all the time. so, yes, sign me up.
So
Um,
let me just tell the gang here a story. So I was talking to Trash Robot about just like the possibility of doing a show together, whatever, and just he happened to mention that he had created this thing called the X1 Orgasmatron, which was like basically like a handheld Sibian. And if you don't know what a Sibian is, look it up. you'll find it. But it's expensive and it's big and it's clunky, and like a handheld one, it worked. It definitely did the trick. And then he was like, "Yeah, I made that." And I was like, "You made that?" I was going to sex parties with that thing all the time, and everybody fucking loved it. You're a genius. I was like, I gotta hang out with this person. I don't.
Wait,
How did
do
you
you know
even
about our
start
other
that?
product?
Um,
Our other, so
no.
the Ambrosia. So we also made a strap-on that was this, but we called it the Bionic strap-on. So it was a strap-on that had touch sensitivity with a vibrator in the base, and so there was so much physics in that. But like the way it
Huh.
worked was that you kind of stroke the base, and then or you stroke the underside of the shaft, or you could do anything, whatever. You could fuck somebody with it or whatever. There's a variety of
Yeah,
things you
yeah.
could do, and then the oscillations in pressure would kind of like build up the signal, and that signal would be transported into the vibrator in the base, and so it would create what they call the rubber hand illusion, which they also use with prosthetic arms and stuff like that. And
Rubber
so
hand illusion. What does that mean?
the rubber hand illusion is an illusion. It's a psychology thing where you can, I think if you look, if you are an amputee and you have a rubber hand, you have a prosthetic. There's an effect, and I may be saying this wrong,
Oh,
where
like
you
I know what you're
can
saying.
you can
Yeah.
create a neural pathway in your brain where you look at the rubber hand and it feels like it's part of your body. You create an
Right.
illusion that the prosthetic is really an extension of your body. There's like things that happen in your mind where you start to include an inanimate object into your like
Right.
self perception of your body. And so we were trying to do that with the strap on, and we crowdfunded it on Indiegogo, and we called it the
That's
Ambrosia Vibe, and it was a whole
awesome.
thing. And so and
Does
we
it
were
still
trying to make some
exist?
sort of, it doesn't, none of our
Okay.
stuff existed, everything collapsed, it
Okay.
all just dissolved into a crater. I've tried a couple of times with different like small entrepreneur types to turn it back into a thing,
Yeah.
and
Just hasn't
ultimately
happened yet.
like yeah, it hasn't happened. There's somebody who I've been talking to a little bit who I mean there's a number, but whatever, everybody's distracted. Like business
Yeah.
sucks. Like this is why I got out of it, is that
I
like
hear you.
doing creative things and making money are orthogonal to one another.
I. What was the word you used?
Orthogonal,
Orthogonal, meaning
like
diametrically opposed, or they?
perpendicular, like
Oh, okay.
perpendicular. Like if I take, there's no shadow of each one. Neither one projects on the other in a meaningful
Right.
way. Like you can be
Huh.
really creative in business, but it doesn't help. And you can make a lot of money and be
Right.
creative, but like you don't, like it doesn't matter.
Right.
It's like a hobby.
Yeah, capitalism is that's like the thing about capitalism, right? The only thing you need to do is make more money, like nothing else. That's like, I mean, this is gonna sound like a weird metaphor, but just follow me for like that's one of the reasons that I used to play World of Warcraft, and I am my whole life been super into RPGs, into fantasy, and like I'll play a D&D game tomorrow, great, but like, and I love video games too, but massively multiplayer online role playing games, they're not role playing games. You just basically figure out what
It's
this
a job.
function is. It's a job. It really is. And like you just get the
Yeah.
best equipment and you spam, you press 1, 2, 3 in this situation. You press 4, 3, 1 in this situation. There's no creativity and you're not rewarded for creativity. There is no, in fact, you're punished for creativity, with the
Yeah.
possible exception of frost mages and early whatever. That's a different story. In general, like there is no reward in capitalism for anything other than just making money. Like that's it,
That's it.
and it's yeah. So okay, I know that we are there. We've already been more than an hour, so I want to let you go, but I want to give you a chance to tell people how to find you and
Yeah.
anything else you want to let them know before we sign off.
Yeah, I'm trash underscore robot on TikTok. That's like the only social media I really put anything on. I am starting a Patreon, which I'm not really super serious about, but it's linked from, I think, Trash Robot. So trashrobot.org is my main webpage. And then I think I'm just going to try to keep everything linked from there. So that should link to everything else, trashrobot.org.
And any any just random thoughts or any other bits of information you wanna share?
I'm just going to say the phrase bottom up Green New Deal one more time because
Bottom
I
up
want to
Green New
try to
Deal.
get people to say that in the hopes that I feel like if that phrase reaches the right person, then we can all just like sit back and let them figure it out, you know.
I love that, and a lot of this stuff, dual power is like that I love about it, and I love about the ideas that you have is that like not everybody wants to do everything, and some people really want to do certain things, and
Yeah.
if you just give them the idea, you just got to, I call it positive mind poison. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just put something in someone, and the right person, it'll
Yeah.
just hit the chord, and they will
Yeah.
do infinite
Yeah.
things with it.
Yeah.
Um,
People say from each according to their ability and to each according to their need. And
yeah.
I prefer from each according to their weird obsession and to each according to their desire, which is kind
Oh.
of like this,
Yeah.
yeah, you know, because
Oh.
I feel like need and ability are very like sort of uh like you're pushing right up against the limit. We're going to
I know what
provide
you
the
mean.
minimum possible that you need, and you do the most that you possibly can. And I feel like
Right.
the weird obsession. There's a Buckminster Fuller quote about this too, about how like 1% of the people can actually figure out how to like solve everything,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
no one should have to do shit, because if the 1% of the people who want to do stuff are like people who have these desperate weird obsessions where the only way to make the existential angst pause is to furiously create things,
I know how that
hypothetically.
feels.
Right. Like, we
why
all
am I
know,
why am I doing this now? Like I'm
right?
not getting paid for this,
Economists have all these cockamamie explanations why people do things, but we know why we do things. We do them to stop the constant existential dread, because
Mm-hmm.
you can't help but do things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, we just need the really obsessive people to be able to do stuff without wasting time. I don't know.
I love it. Thank you so much, and thank
Thank you.
you to all of you who tuned in to this first live. I will be doing it again, and also this will be available both here, and I'm gonna make it into a listenable podcast. I'll probably trim it down and put some different pieces out because there's a lot of really great stuff in here that I probably will have to listen to again to understand. Um, I thank you so much for being here, and like let's continue to bounce back off of each other because
Yeah.
I think we've got some really interlocking
Yeah.
ideas and skill
You're also
sets.
only like a quick Acela trip from where, like, I could come to New York and bring Raspberry Pis in a big
Oh,
bag. Also, that's a possibility. So,
I mean,
I would be.
I used to be a photographer. That was like my job before I became a dog guru. So I've got a whole studio. We can make like real big video. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
Love
So
it.
let's talk about that. I want to get some stuff into Philly too, but I want to get this to the world. So,
Hell yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time.
good night. I don't know what to.